Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. I am still Joe Cox, and I'm so pumped to have you all here. And I just realized, Brandon, hi, I'm going to introduce you here in a second, but I just realized just by watching because now I do podcast and put it on YouTube, that it kind of just breaks in. I don't get to tell anybody. If you're not listening to the podcast, it's got this funky intro of what pop marketing is about. The YouTube doesn't have that. It's too long. Nobody needs a minute. You're gonna die on YouTube. So yes, this is the place where us pop culture lovers, us marketers, we kind of talk about those spaces in between brand marketing and popular culture, and there are some staples inside of that. And if you've been listening to the show a lot, you know what those staples are. It's entertainment, it's toys, it's fashion, it's sports, and one of the main ones, and a lot of things that I love. One of the main ones is gaming. We talked about gaming a lot. We've talked to esports specialists. We've talked to people inside the world of gaming, but a lot of times I feel like what we skip is kind of just general. Every year we need to kind of get a general feel as marketers, especially marketers that are not in the world of gaming, just to get that perspective of what's going on and get it from a pro that is inside the world. So this year, towards the end of the year, I know, but I have brought on Brandon Painter. So Brandon, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Doing well, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
It is my pleasure, and I can't wait to gab about gaming and brands and marketing and all that stuff with you here over the next hour. So, Brandon Painter, why this guy for gaming? Well, he's vice president of brand strategy at Gamesquare, which we're going to learn a little bit more about. Fully integrated modern media collective. I like that. Sounds like it might be kind of a collective of. It looks like a lot's going on. You're going to tell us about it, I'm sure. And then Brandon himself helps brands navigate both the competitive side of gaming and the casual gaming landscape, which if you're not super gamer, you might not know that there is kind of sort of big differences in between these giant things going on inside of the world of competitive gaming versus the great place I come from and love, which just kind of that AAA game that I get sucked into the story and can play on my own and not have to wait on getting inside of a room with other people and having to depend on other things going on. You help people navigate the competitive and casual gaming landscape, and today you're going to do that for us. So that's the job today. We've worked together in the past. It's really awesome to catch up with you again. How are you? Tell me a bit about what's up with Gamesquare. What are you doing over there?
Yeah. So Gamesquare, it's technically Gamesquare Holdings. So we have a couple of companies within the portfolio that span across all of gaming. That's why there's the competitive and the casual piece of it. On the competitive side, we own Complexity Gaming, which is a competitive esports organization that's been around for a long time. Jason Lake and the guys over there have a long history of success across a wide variety of titles. I think they've dipped in and out of 30 plus different games at this point. They've got a history or a legacy in CS:GO, so on the first person shooter side of things, and then we also have Drini, who is a 12-time, maybe 11-time Madden Championship Series winner. So kind of that full spectrum. And then when it comes to the other solutions or services that we provide, we own Stream Hatchet, which is a live streaming data and analytics firm. We have Sidekick, which is a relationship or creator relationship platform that there's both the self-service side and the management services. So we can help you find advocates for your brand or your game or what have you, and help make that magic happen. We also have an agency called Zoned, and they are really one of our strongest influencer arms. They've got a lot of connections within pop culture, so athletes, musicians, the gamer folks, of course. And then we also have operations in the UK. So we have an agency called Code Red, which does similar things to Zoned, but they also have a pretty solid center of excellence for developing Discord communities, which is something that is core to the gaming or gamers, but not something that is really easy to cultivate and do. But they do that for Red Bull and some other brands. And then we also have Fourth Frame, which is a production studio. Femi, it comes from FaZe Clan. He has deep roots within esports as well as just gaming in general, but he also lives and breathes at the intersection of pop culture and gaming. As an example, they just got done filming a cipher for Lil Yachty and Amp, so Kai Cenat and some of those folks. So, kind of all over the place there. And then lastly, we also have Mission Supply. So we have a consumer product arm as well. So, if there's any kind of collaborations, whether it be anime and a gaming org, or, pulling together influencer kits, that super exclusive collectible type stuff that gets people pretty excited about a campaign or whatever you have going on, we have that as well. So it's really end to end, and it depends on whatever the context is where we can help best.
So that's why I wanted to have you on here, because it's like awesome to get like such a broad view, because gaming has, if you haven't got caught up since Nintendo was kind of the king, or PlayStation 2 or 3, you might be surprised on like the size and depth and width of like all that's going on inside of gaming. Because you mentioned some of it. And it's pretty easy to say like casual versus like competitive, but there's a lot going. There's a lot of communities just by game itself,
Right.
then by teams, by genres, by speed runs, by Twitch followings. There is a lot going on, and I loved how you just kind of explained it too. It's like even going through what you guys do, it's a lot of times hard to pin down, because it's almost like social in that same way that like gaming kind of goes everywhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a drum. Again, it seems like it oozes everywhere. And yes, everyone games, right? Like, uh, that's a good transition. I just wanted to like, what's your perspective of like the modern gamer? Can you even say what a modern, like that modern gamer is like? We know it's not the person in their basement, like it is, that's there. It's
Yeah.
just broader than that. And like you're going through mobile and different things. Is there any way that you kind of to keep yourself in check? Like, where do you see like what's the modern gamer look like?
Well, what's interesting is, I mean, it's a third of the planet's population, essentially, right? You've got roughly 2 billion people who play games in some kind of capacity. But what's really interesting is, you mentioned Nintendo, and they were that kind of the king. The NES came out when 85, I think, and the Sega Genesis, followed suit in 89. But people who grew up with gaming are now integrating it in all parts of their lives. So the average gamer is now, 30, 31 years old. Their parents, they have assets, right? They have college degrees. They're fairly affluent. The average income for a lot of these titles, or a lot of the audiences we work with, is anywhere from 65K to 120K, right? Like it's not a little amount. and that's something that is interesting to brands, obviously, as they're trying to get their products in front of new people. But then, yeah, it's a spectrum. You have, well, I guess I didn't mention the gender split. The way that South Park portrayed the gamer was the large, overweight guy that was sitting in his parents' basement, right? And
Yep,
that's
smoking down Mountain Dew, and
yeah,
then
exactly. And for my old clients that were Mountain Dew, luckily there's still some of those people that do the do and have Doritos and that type of thing. But at the same time, it's roughly 49-51 female male split, right?
yeah,
So the fact that there are a lot of women that game now as well, they do tend to lean more into the casual mobile gaming space. It's when they have time, they'll pull out their device, or yeah, and that's anything from Wordle to Bejeweled to, at this point, you've got Hearthstone and you've got Wild Rift, and there's again, there's even layers within those layers. And so that's what's so fun and so interesting about what it is that we do, because we take the brands, we take the audiences, and we distill it down, and we find that exact intersection within the gaming landscape that makes the most sense, depending on what the message is at the time, what the product is that they're trying to introduce to the market, and those types of things. So um, there is a general sense for who a gamer is at this point, but it also has a spectrum of its own at this point.
yeah, that's great. I mean, I always say too, just talking to a lot of people inside the industry, too, younger, and older. It's a lot of people, a lot of the Gen Z generation. I mean, they don't maybe even consider themselves a gamer. Like, I don't consider myself a movier because I watch movies,
Right.
like that's just something we do. Like, I watch stuff, like I game. I don't necessarily going to put a tattoo on myself that says like born game, but it's just something I do. It's just something I spend time with. It's a part of things. So I would probably just I would say that from what you're saying, it's like if you have a product, you're in, like, especially, I mean, if you're in the CPG or the like broad products, I mean, like the gaming world and the gaming space, you have a bunch of people spending a lot of time inside different worlds and different things. Like, it's probably something you should be looking at,
Yeah,
uh, you
absolutely.
know,
There,
and
it's it.
it'd probably surprise you, like the amount of brands that would be able to jump into that space and find a really cool home inside that space if they know how to do it. So that's my next question for you, because I'm going to skip around
Okay.
because you brought up such a good point. But it's like, we'll get to it. Like, I'm a brand. I don't know how to get, like, brands have not done two, and will say it's probably two ways. Gaming hasn't done the best of getting to like connecting with brands in the past, because the worlds are very different. They don't come from those places. They don't want a traditional media buy. I don't know what that is. Like, it's been building the car, it seems, while it's going 100 miles per hour.
100%.
And
Yeah.
a lot of like just kind of a new emerging thing, and everybody trying to get their heads wrapped around it. And then brands on the same side have done a really poor job in the past 20 years on like integrating well with the communities, because they're trying to treat it like traditional marketing or campaign based short term bursts of support and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys do that, design that to say, take a brand that says, hey, I know my market's here, I just don't know where to go. I don't know where or how to like enter. What's my entrance ramp into this space, right? And I hate it when it's like, how do I dip my toe into it? And it's like, you're not going to be able to just dip your toe into it.
Yeah.
But how do you like work? Would you find that spot, that sweet spot? Because it's so wide and big. I know that there's different games, different consoles and technologies and different things that are probably right for me. How do you go about, inside the idea of like finding that strategic place for a company to find their sweet spot inside such a big space?
Yeah, absolutely. For gaming, it's like any other. medium that you work with as an advertiser, right? So um, it depends on what you're looking to introduce. It depends on the message. It depends on the brand's objectives or the business objectives. I think that's where we're starting to get to as an industry. And that unravels or spirals into a whole other conversation. But, at one point, it was all about Flash. It was all about the disruption. It was all about, what can we do to grab those headlines? How do we get the awards? How do we, it's you know how it works, right? And so what we're trying to do now, and what we have started to do as Gamesquare with the acquisition of Sidekick and Stream Hatchet, is we, and I hate this analogy, but it's the science and it's the art. And so it's blending the data with the creative ideas in order to make the best possible product. But to go back to your question, it all stems from what they're trying to achieve at that given moment. If it's awareness, if it's a mass eyeball play, then there are entry points that are more media forward. As an example, NBA 2K, right? The new title just dropped last Friday, I believe. We've done some integrations within 2K. I personally have done some hard coded integrations within 2K. The eCPMs that you can get being inside of a game that millions of people are playing rival those that you can get paying for normal banner ads, right? And so there are pieces of the funnel that actually have one-to-one tools in that gaming toolkit that we can use in order to get you in front of those audiences. If it is, let's see, say even an in-person event. This is a real life example from something that we did over Labor Day weekend. Six Flags has taken an interest in esports and gaming. They understand that the theme park industry still fantastic. I personally love roller coasters. I love, here in Kansas City, we've got Worlds of Fun, the Haunt, the different haunted houses, those types of things. But they need to evolve and find new ways to capture interest with that new generation. And gaming is one of those things. And so what they're doing is they're launching game lounges inside of different locations around the country, and they're calling them E6, esports, Six Flags, right? And so we developed a Fortnite map actually, and contracted some influencers to go down to what is it? It's their San Antonio location. And
Sure.
they had a big event where there was an IRL experience tied to this Fortnite map that you can still go in and play now, but they brought the fans together with the creators, and they made a bit of a splash there, right? They established their foothold in the gaming space. They showed everyone that they were serious, and they brought in potentially some new fans. So there's just a wide variety of different ways that you can make that happen.
Yeah. And I will say too, I probably didn't give, it's not that it's gaming the gaming world's fault or the brand's fault. There's also like there was some real big difficulties up until recently. Like we're starting to see the band get like the plan come together, right? Like you're starting to see the technology getting to a spot where we can do these things. And you said two things that I want to make sure everybody gets. That's like crazy. Like that's cool. Um, it's tough because back in the day, if you wanted to be a part of a game, it was like being in. It was like kind of being in like the Batman movie, like the whole traditional giant long term. It's very expensive. Like you could be in the game, but you have to be in the development side of that, and that is big for like it was just a tough marriage because like how you develop these games like it used to be where it was like the game's done, like it's on this CD and you just pop it in and it's like it's done. There's no updates, there's no live real time whatever, there's just it's done, right? And that didn't allow us to work really fast
Mm-hmm.
or to like do anything but like really big stuff, right? Like, or you could be the brand that goes, I'm going to make a game and then you find out how hard, like just hard. Don't make games. Don't, and especially now, it's like that. You don't need to. You're not going to get the. I mean, I did play the 7-Up Spot game and Noid game back in the day. Not neither very great, but could have been worse. But I will say, like, there. You said two things that is like game changers. One is NBA. You're playing the game and you're basically saying like the advertisements that would be whenever I'm watching NBA on television. So it's real close to the same thing. People are playing competitively. They're inside, they're playing the game, and the ads, just like the stats for players, I assume, is like changing in real time. Or like you can say, no, I don't, I can update these ads based on who's buying, and we can build them around the stadium of the game. Is that right? Like
Yeah.
you
So
buy different spots. That's killer.
yeah, no, it's really cool. There's the term metaverse that again, that's like its own potential long-winded conversation. But what the 2K franchise or what NBA 2K has done is they have rolled out the city, and ultimately, it's more of like a open world role playing type of experience. It's not just you pick the Pacers, you pick the Thunder, and you've got franchise mode, and you do the games, you trade players, etc. No, this is you starting as your created player. They have a fake city that you walk around, and then there's obviously the gameplay elements because that's how you level yourself up. But what they've done is it's twofold. There's the hard coded elements, which, like you discussed, even though it's not, I mean, there is the disc component, so that there's still very much the development train is moving, and
Yep.
you pick what where you're going to be, or you miss the train, and
Mm-hmm.
those are much longer dev cycles. It's maybe 9 or 10 months to find yourself hard coded into some of the cut scenes or things like that. Like we pick and chose what new Gatorade products, the players would grab out of the convenience store and different things like that. Or there is the dynamic pieces, which
Mm.
if you walk around the city, they have billboards. Again, this is a game and a franchise and experience and a player base that wants it to be as authentic as possible. And luckily for advertisers and for brand partners, that means that they're bombarded with ads. So you have the sideline digital signage. You have what's wrapped around the goal on the court and those different things. And those are also pieces of inventory that 2K sells to the partners of the NBA. But this dynamic piece allows people who are not necessarily heavily invested in the NBA overall to come in, and maybe for a month, 2 months, whatever it might be, you can sponsor an event. So within the city, they've got different places that
Got it.
can, go to a court and encounter something new or whatever it might be, or you can sponsor a game mode, or you can do those types of things. And that is where the live service piece kicks in, because those pieces of inventory do rotate. And that's where they can make those changes kind of on the fly during the life cycle of that game.
Super smart. And that kind of bridges into the next one that you had mentioned too, which is like, and these are strategically made to answer the questions of like brands wanting to be a part of this. And then game makers and developers being like, whoa, we have to design it we have to bake it in to it. And now we're going to have to be media platform. And now we have to be this. And now we have to have people sell
Mm-hmm.
this space. But another one, I said that the reason that brands had a trouble getting into games with marketing a lot of times was the fact that making games are really hard. So there's been some crazy stuff. You just mentioned too, like it's kind of like NBA 2K is like doing things where it's like, no, you don't get to make the game, but you get to make this special tournament or a special kind of activation that's within it using the building blocks that we've already built for you. We're going to design this for you, but it's not going to take as much time or effort or money as it would to build the whole thing from scratch. And then I think the most genius, like you hear about it a lot with Roblox, but making a Roblox game is not like, it is easier than making most. There's a lot of building blocks, but it's not, hey, just hire anybody down the street and like we'll just put it together. It's still pretty tough.
Right.
But like Fortnite, like you're saying, like their approach is, hey, we have these really easy building blocks. Let's take these, and you don't have to, you can just come into our world and we can play these different like worlds. Like we'll put you inside, we'll make a Coca-Cola world, we'll make a world that is Six Flags, and it is not meant to be a long-term place or thing. Like you're either going to get like different awards there, you're going to get different gear there, it might be just a place to visit, but it's made for a small amount of time, and that experience kind of comes and goes, but it's a chance for brands to kind of have that moment in the sun, which we'd never been able to do, or haven't had been able to do as much and seen as much inside of gaming. So I feel like those kinds of experiences really open things up. And now that I'm hearing, again, I'm a dad, I'm falling behind, but now that I'm hearing like them doing that same thing with the city inside, other sports games, and I'm sure other places, it's like that's where I see the future kind of heading towards. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You referenced you and I working together years ago at this point, and what's interesting is every step of the way in my career, I've seen parallels between the rise and evolution of social and what's happening in the gaming spaces.
Yeah.
And something that we tried to harness for, say, a Coleman, right, was UGC, or user generated content.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now that you were referencing, Roblox, Fortnite with Unreal Editor in Fortnite, UEFN,
Yep.
or even some of these publisher supported mods like Grand Theft Auto RP or Roleplay,
Yep.
right? They're democratizing the game building experience so that more creators or people who are hobbyists or enthusiasts or what, it's like this middle ground between people who really enjoy the games, right, and the people who are creating the games. There's this middle ground of people who are extraordinarily talented, who are now allowed to go in and build games inside of games. It's like an in-game experience, right? And this is the next step or the next chapter in the UGC economy. And so one thing that we are actually doing at Gamesquare is we have quietly rolled out Moonlight Studios, which is an in-game experience development studio. And so within Roblox, within Fortnite, within Grand Theft Auto, we now are working with brands like I mentioned, the Coca-Cola and Six Flags example, but we're looking to build out that center of excellence. And we have, it's like a party analogy, right? If you're throwing a party, you can rent out a space, or let's say high school, right? High school party. You may not have the influence or the friend circle to throw this big party, to get the eyeballs, to get the amount of impressed folks that you want.
Yeah.
But the cool kid has a really dope house. He's got the pool, he's got the DJ setup, he's got all this different stuff, right? Why don't you just throw your party at the cool kid's house? And then you can associate yourself with that platform. You already have a built-in friend circle with the cool kid. You have the tools and the space and the environment in order to throw the best party that you can and associate yourself with that. That's what we're doing within these games is, with Roblox, they've got 200 million plays in the last 30 days. They have 65 million monthly active users. Fortnite, 242 million folks have played it in the last 30 days. Even Grand Theft Auto 5 or Grand Theft Auto RP is the third most watched category on Kick, which again, Kick is something we could talk about for a while. But Grand Theft Auto 5, which has been out forever, was the second most watched game between Valorant and League of Legends in Q2 of this year. And that's insane, so
That's
like there's
insane.
still there's that built-in audience. You don't necessarily have to build and roll out your own game. They're giving you the toolkits, and we have the people and the experience and the relationships in order to take your brand and inject it into these places where there's already a highly captivated audience who loves to experience this type of stuff.
Yeah, and you got like a guide, which is really handy to have, of being like, well, if you're gonna do GTA RP, like there's just some language and rule, like it's a different kind of language, and there's just a different kind of like these players like this, they're not gonna. This has not worked in the past. We got to be, if we can't go in with a hammer and
Right.
start trying to get them to like, buy your canned beans or whatever it is
Exactly.
that and we're going to have to drop things in certain ways and speak about it in certain ways, and it's going to be very different inside of a Roblox integration and very different inside of a Fortnite integration, right? And
Absolutely.
so like you don't necessarily want to just jump in there and on your own and try to weather those storms. That's nuts. GTA, no one, I mean, people wonder why GTA 6 has taken its time, and I'm like, why wouldn't they? Like if your game is still rocking, like after how many years, where people have now been raised and don't even probably know what the original storyline is. They just think it's just a crazy like mod game, like it's just a nutty. And I think it's really interesting too. Is like I remember when all these mods and stuff was like kind of what we're talking about. These people who are like, cool, I'm going to use all the stuff that's inside this game engine, which is another conversation to have on like the role of game engines. A lot of crazy stuff going on. We have Unreal. We have there was big news. I forgot what was the other Unity, and
Unity.
Unity just rolled out some sweet news, and I said that facetiously for independent gamer makers. That's saying like, hey, we're not gonna charge by how much money you're making. We're gonna charge you by how many downloads you have. Meaning, like you can use our engine that makes it way easier to make cool games on. You don't have to build your own anymore. But at the same time, we're gonna have to make money. We're gonna change the way we're making money off of you. So, in an instant, that's like changed a lot for people that are making games on top of it. So it's it's moved really fast, it seems. I mean, it's been 20 years or so, but like it's funny that people, now you hear that there are certain mods of games that to a lot of people are the games themselves. Like they don't even know like what, this game came from a mod. I
Yeah.
think some of the bigger competitive esports games were like offshoots of mods of other games, right? Which were just super smart people that were like, I have the ideas and the game brain to know what people are going to like, but I don't necessarily know how to hard code like building my own game engine, right? So it's just like more access to stuff and giving more creative people access. And I love how you put it to like that's just the new UGC. Just it was pictures, then it's videos. Well, it was blogs, now it's pictures, and then videos, and lots of short vertical videos. And now it's more into like, well, a game instance, small Roblox experience is just a UGC piece. Or if I am a clothes designer on Roblox, or if I just make avatars, or if I whatever it is, there's new economies going on. It's all blowing my mind. Like it's a lot, and I'm in it. You're in it. Like it's super fun to talk about. But I do get where brands. I will just restate this. It's like don't just jump in and say we need to be in games. So let's call some game companies. It's like no, you got to build a strategy. Call people that know what's going on and can put you in the best place so you can win. Because I see too many brands, and I don't know if you've had the same experience, that will dip their toe in, and somebody takes their money, they spend a bunch on an event or something like that, and it just nothing really comes from it. They don't get their expectations weren't set in the right way, and then they're like, "Well, gaming, I'll never do gaming again."
Yeah.
Like too much spend and didn't get us what we wanted, and that brand is out
Yeah.
for at least a couple years until the next CMO is reinstated. So it's like it's cool to see like so many different opportunities coming up for brands. And I really like the way you talked about that for like the UGC of things. Cool. So like, man, there's like such crazy stuff. There's like, it's a big game release. It's just, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. One of those is like on the competitive side. That is my like, I am not in that world, and it is itself its own world. Esports has turned into that, and I think it really like got as crept to as much mainstream as it ever has with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I don't know why everybody is confused. It's like 2022 and 23 have been really rough for the esports because, or not really rough. Yes, rough because it looks like what had happened was what's going to happen. You got really big. There was a huge explosion into mainstream over the pandemic when everybody's stuck in their houses,
Mm-hmm.
and the market goes crazy out of like speculation. And there's a lot of stuff like things are rocking and rolling, and the economy kicks back a little bit. Everything seems to be like we seem to be in like a hangover on that.
Mm-hmm.
But my thing is for you being inside of it. Do you see it? We see a lot of things going on inside of that world that would say, oh, esports is like throttling down. My guess is it's not throttling down at all, but some of the inflation, it's kind of adjusting itself from such a big craze. Is that, you think that's a rightful thing, or how do you see this kind of phase we're going through right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we all collectively went through was hopefully a once in a lifetime,
Yeah, hopefully, yes.
a once in a lifetime global catastrophe that impacted absolutely everything, and that's not something that you can forecast for. That's not something um, that you can predict by any means. And so when everyone was stuck inside, like you said, that's
And there was no sports, by the way.
that's
All
true.
in one day. And on one day, regular sports are gone. You
Yeah.
know what's really close to watching real sports? Watching esports is pretty close. Like watching NFL at least. Like the transition places. Maybe not jumping right on,
Yeah.
you know, uh, 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 like South Korean spacecraft channel, but like maybe it is watching Madden,
Yeah.
and playing that is pretty close. So I'm sure there's quite the boom
There
of
was.
people
Yeah.
trying to get their sports in.
You've got, you've got the sports sims, which at this point, not nearly as many people watch, right? You've got Call of Duty, you've got your basics, you've got League of Legends and those. And of course, yeah, I mean, people were stuck in, you had the era of Tiger King, right? Like everybody was trying to find something to entertain themselves. They gamed more because they weren't having to run around. They didn't necessarily have the busy lives. Everything was digital, everything was video, everything. Even hanging out with people, seeing family members, any type of social interaction was digital. And so, yeah, there was an absolutely meteoric impact on gaming. We thought it was going to occur naturally, but that is a crazy catalyst that just made it happen, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
with esports, even though esports dates back to the early 90s, with Quake and even some of the fighting games and what have you. When people first started, even CS:GO, when people first started making money competing in esports, the technology and everything has grown at a ridiculous pace. And so what we're seeing right now is market maturation. There was no possible way that that
To keep
trajectory
that
was going to
going.
be continued. Like that.
And guess what? And guess what? Like, there's no way, but in this, like, when everybody puts on their glasses of like, or their, reality field, the glasses, and you
Mhm.
can't tell the market, you can't grow it. So everybody's like, we're gonna do it. And then, it's not. It's got like, you cannot keep it up
Yeah.
like that because there's already been such a giant flux. But then everybody gets super excited.
Yeah.
you know
Absolutely.
and doesn't do you that well to say like, hey guys, just to let you know, things are gonna like, we're gonna still be up way further than we were, but things are gonna like even keel out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just not what you hear on a quarterly reports.
Right.
It's just not, it's not how that works, which is unfortunate, but
It,
like,
it is.
yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
It's interesting because it was a perfect storm. One, there was the pandemic. A lot of people stuck at home. They're watching things, they're playing things, what have you. But at the same time, there was also the transition from MLG or Major League Gaming to the publishers being the owners and operators of
Mm.
the ecosystem itself. So then instead of it being independently ran, it is now a product of the same people that are creating the games. So then that means that the income streams and the revenues and all of those different components that make up the economy of that particular niche are monopolized. And so there was that piece, and we're still trying to figure out what the answer is to that. But you've seen it with Activision Blizzard, the Call of Duty
Hmm.
League. Overwatch League is now looking at third party tournament providers in order to keep the Overwatch League alive, those different things. But then the other piece of it too, you had VC funds or VCs that were throwing money at gaming without truly looking at what was going on business wise. And then you had the orgs seeing esports as the main darling instead of all of the other pieces
Yep.
involved. And they were wanting to pay premiums, salary wise, to have the best possible players on their rosters so that they drew in the eyeballs, they drew in the potential brand partners and those types of things. There's just an amalgamation of a lot of mistakes that we're now having to course correct. And at some point, we're probably going to see a moment where the professional players are going to now have to take more modest salaries. Nobody wants that. Nobody applies for a job and is like, I will take
Less than what I
20%
did.
of what I was making, the other year or whatever the situation is. And so that's an interesting piece to it, among all of the other things. Plus, I read something on LinkedIn earlier that was the most succinct way of putting it. The people who are saying, hey, esports is dying, are the same people who never believed in it in the first place. So now it's
Yep.
just an aha type of moment when there are doom and gloom headlines, when really, when you look at it, even esports viewership is up 4% this year.
Yeah.
I
Which
mean,
is like
it's
huge. I mean, you're already, and people don't understand also how much growth opportunity there was inside of the esport too. It's not even $1 billion like industry yet, like it has got so much more space to grow. Like it just got put on a rocket ship for that moment in time that no one would have been able to put on. And then, you know, the good thing is this, it's like, also there's never been more ways to monetize as an athlete or a content creator, of kind of getting smart about that brand that you're building for yourself, or do you have subscribers
Hmm.
Are you kind of running your own community within this stuff? And it's a very interesting space that we find ourselves, from somebody who kind of watched this social stuff kind of build from the beginning, and now I'm like, oh, this is just how it works now. Like, this has been turned into a whole system, and if you want to see how it's going to look in the next 10 years, like, gaming's a really good space to see how the creator kind of world kind of works. It's a great place to see how community management always has been. Like, you want to know what real community management is? Like, you talk to a game community manager versus like a community manager for Tide,
Right.
and they're just two different beasts. And you even talked about it. We can't even talk about Discord because it's a rabbit hole of rabbit holes, right? Like, of saying, like, it's just a I hear it all the time in meetings still. We should, like, maybe we should test out Discord. I'm like, no, 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 you don't. I don't. Nobody's gonna just go to your Discord channel. Like, what do you have that is building a community around that? Like, that's why games have gone there. I used to do Discord just because I allowed me to open talk with my friends. I still do that with our, like, virtual D&D group. Is it just gives us a really easy place to hop on and and talk through the game that we're, to communicate the game.
For sure.
So so uh so much. I think that's a great kind of, like, push of what's going on, and it's going on a global level too. And there's all this work going on to kind of build that, with so much money. You even talked about, like, Dallas Cowboys, and, like, you look at almost any NFL, NBA franchise and team, like, they're probably going to have a pretty good investment right now inside competitive gaming, because they know the change of they know the opportunity. So if you really would follow the money on some of that, to understand that, the future's probably pretty bright on that side. But again, it seems to me like a great time to come in. Like, it's like, when everybody's fudding the market of saying, like, yeah, esports, it's like, no, that's the time to start building your empire inside of it. That's when you want to, like, join the community.
Yeah, it's like the whole we don't run from the fire, we run towards it type of, mentality. But I think, again, it just completely depends on what the objectives of those brands are. I would say, more often than not, we would absolutely start on the casual side. But I think, one thing that you mentioned was looking at traditional sports and their investments in these different groups. And it's well, two points that I want to make there. One, absolutely. You've got the Kraft family, um, obviously notoriously known for the Patriots and some of those groups in the Northeast. They have Oxygen Esports as the group that they've kind of bankrolled, and then you've got the what is it the Cranky Sports Group, who owns um, is it the Kings or somebody on that side, on the other coast, that had the Guard and some other groups. And then Complexity, if you've seen what their logo looks like, they have investment from Jerry Jones and the group behind the Dallas Cowboys, like you mentioned. And so, and actually, 100 Thieves, they've got investment from some of the Cleveland Cavalier folks. And so, one of the things, going back real quick before we move forward, that caused some of these issues is people just assumed with the increase in popularity that the traditional sports model could just be copied and pasted into esports. And,
Yep.
Whether it's because of the folks that, are part of these ownership groups or whatever it is, we're finding that just doesn't work. The franchising model may not necessarily be the key to success for esports like it is for traditional sports. And so some of those things are continuing to work themselves out as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean it's constant evolution, but like we always want to fight the next war with the things that won the last one for us, right? So it's the same when the internet started. It's like let's do traditional advertising on and just slap it into, the computer like that, and then it builds naturally and organically. I think that people just don't realize a lot of times that it just takes time, and before you know it, the water warms slowly, and then before you know it, it's a whole new, it's there. And but it's not usually a slap in the face or like a giant boom that the pandemic kind of was. So it's a very interesting time to be alive on that. All right. So another thing I did want to talk about is like there's so much on push on gaming too. Like people always said, like, I hate to even say it, but it looks like the world of entertainment and like superhero movies, which we had a great run, but it's like you can tell like a little bit of the energy is deflating because it just got, can't play the same tune over and over again. At some point it's got to kind of stable itself out, and we got to start finding where the next stories are going to be coming from. And I had tons of people ask me like, what's going to happen when we don't have, when we when we lose this, what are we going to be talking about? Where are the next stories going to come from? I'm like, man, you got a lot of stories, like half not that, like some of the best movies come from stories or books or things that aren't that necessarily deep or big. So like a director can have fun with it and make it their own. And like, man, games seem to be the place to me of where we're going to see that next giant move of nostalgia mixed with like just the IPs, the power of the IPs from gamings, and the type of we've had a lot of crappy movies on gaming until like the last couple years. So like you have the Last of Us, the HBO push, which was killer, one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen. And then Mario, and like you have movies about making games, Tetrises, and like
Yeah.
you have a lot of these things coming out of like I think people are starting to see like, oh, we may have broken the lid finally on making an actual good, a well done story and movie inside the gaming world. And what do you think? Where do you, from your inside world, where do you think that kind of IP stuff is going to? We're going to see a Zelda movie at some point? I hope.
It'd be cool. But as somebody pointed out to me the other day, he doesn't speak like ever. So
Has never. It would be really weird.
it's like he has full conversations with, Link has full conversations with Zelda and things, and he's just like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
But yeah, no,
love the character building. Yeah, that's totally old school video games. It's so
yeah.
funny.
But no, as far as IP is concerned, some of the most storied and loved characters outside of comic books can be found in games. You've got, well, a laundry list. We don't need to start naming
Yeah, yeah, it's
some of
crazy.
the best characters and storylines, etc. But I think the thing that has changed most recently is, and again, not to make all of this about generational shifts or things like that, but I really do think that gaming in its entirety has been impacted by the generation that saw it come out and matured with it, grew with it, loves it. As you mentioned, now it's just as much a social platform as it is anything else. But the early days of video game movies, it's like a video game would come out, and Mario is a great example of this. That first Mario movie and the ever cursed Bowser character in it, and those types of things. It's like they saw the reaction from fans when these games came out and people wanted more. They loved being able to immerse themselves in these stories in a way that they haven't been before. It's like, you've got books where you read, You play the pictures in your head, you imagine yourself in those environments and that type of thing. But with a video game, you actually put yourself into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And these days, like with Baldur's Gate, right, you can create whatever story you want. And, Starfield did a little bit of that and some other things there. But the fact that that foundation exists, it's so ripe for TV shows and for movies. And originally, it was more of a money grab. It was seeing that an IP was well received, and they're like, well, shit, we can,
Mm-hmm.
this is good. It worked when we put out a game, so let's create a movie. And it's like, what's the script going to be? I don't know. How are we going to develop the characters? I don't really know. He just jumps on turtles and mushrooms. It's like, well, how about we play up the plumber thing? And, it's now there are years and years and years of content that they can dip into. And then, like you
Yep.
mentioned, there is still that next piece. So it's patching holes in the lore, or it's uncovering some of those fan theories and giving people that satisfaction, or maybe bridging the gap between a game and the next iteration in the franchise, or whatever it might be. And there's just so much that can be done there if done carefully. And so now, instead of it being people who aren't familiar with those games, all of these studios are able to, and streaming services and what have you, are able to hire people who are players, who are fans, who have been in and around it, lived it, breathed it, and they're able to do those franchises justice, along with the technology and everything at this point that they haven't been able to in the past. And so it's a fantastic combination, and we're just now seeing what the possibilities are there.
Yeah, and video games get to look all the learnings that have happened over the last 15 years or decade of world building with Marvel, or world building of the do's and don'ts of that, and what makes, and working with the fan base,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just closing yourself off and saying, I've never played this Mario game. Like, let's make it absolutely the weirdest 90s movie ever created. But basically, because they're just like, we don't have any context, like, as a person, because it was new. It was a bunch of kids were doing it at that time. They just knew it was giants. They made
Right.
movies like they used to. Now, there are groups that dig into the community, work with the community to make sure that it's satisfying, like bringing in new people that might have not played the game, but also the millions of people that have. And then you have to like balance the hardcore fans versus the people who are just like, yeah, I mean, I'm just happy that there's movies about it. And it is a dance. I mean, it is, but it is not the Wild West anymore. Like, all of those gaming companies, movie companies, entertainment companies, they all know now, okay, this is how we work with a fan base. This is how we make this storyline open, both fan service as well as, make it mainstream enough for bigger audiences to like it. I think it's a crazy, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but you can tell, like, world building was something we would never even heard of until, Marvel did it. And now
Right.
that that's been done, I do think it's an ability to at least, like, let's take some time with it. It just doesn't have to be a one-off, or just streaming series in general. Look what that's done with everything. I mean, I'm almost Star Warsed out, and I don't know how that works. But Osaka, like, now, like the new, like now, they keep drawing me back in and making stuff from cartoons. So, like, it's absolutely an insane time, and I really do think that games have such a rich history and all these epic characters. Like, it is just waiting to happen. Like, and like you said, there's a ton of people that have played Metal Gear. Like there's people that are in the industry that know it well, that know the ins and outs and the context around those things. I hadn't really thought about that. Of like, there's not a lot of Mario's very weird. Japanese gaming in general, like it's just its own thing. It's a weird, and like you're not going to be able to sell a movie necessarily on that. And I think they did a good job of like building that crazy world, but doing it in a way that like was a good palette,
for
for that.
sure. And what's
No, and I'm not
interesting,
saying it was like my favorite movie of the year or anything, but my kid loved it.
it was pretty. I mean, well, to be
Made
honest,
me happy.
I had I had high expectations and I was underwhelmed, but they did a good job. So,
I
um,
was too. I wasn't gonna ever be like, yeah. I mean, but they had to choose a place, and but I did see the expression on my 9-year-old and like her immediate like obsession with all things Mario, wanting to learn more. And then I'm like, oh, you want to get weird? Let's play Mario 2. I mean, you want to see what strange is. Um, so before I let you go, I'm going to have to zoom through these. So we're going to make it like not a speed round because I'm not doing that. But like there's some things that I wanted to get your kind of perspective on. One of those, we'll go with the first one is like now it looks like everybody's in games. So Amazon bought Twitch a while back, and it's like Amazon's so big it's hard to see what they're even doing with gaming because like I know that I have a controller and I can play it on my Fire TV and it's streaming through, but it's a weird group of games and it's just not quite there. I bought the Google
oh, the Stadia.
Stadia. I was all in on Stadia, and that wasn't the best decision because that's gone. And then now I'm seeing Netflix and then their approach to things. Like, what's going on in that world? Like, where do you see like the opportunity? Like, do you see what's Netflix doing differently, and do you see that being fruitful?
Yeah, so there are definitely layers to what Netflix is doing on the games front. What's interesting is they're not approaching it games first, right? So they've got this catalog of content that everybody loves, and it's constantly growing and changing and shifting and what have you. But what they have done is they've said, well, up until a couple of weeks ago, it was mobile only. You can go into our app, scroll down, we've got a little game section. It's a value, it's added value. It's like, something additional that we can provide to you. It's
Yep,
not
it's another reason not to quit your account.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it really, like, it's like because they're competing now.
Yes.
It was 2 years ago. There was nothing. It's like you got your Netflix account. And now it's like everybody. I'm spending more on street. It's bad. It's
Yeah, we're
bad.
back to cable, but unbundled and through the internet. That's what we're at. But
I mean, it's worse. We have been tricked into like spending more, and it's nuts. So like now I'm just dancing around season by season. So when Game of Thrones is on, I'll do and Last of Us, like HBO's in, and then you're out. It's way more trouble than it was. But
it's true.
so that makes a lot of sense. So Netflix is coming in saying at least now until we build it, it's like a an ad. It's another reason to get more value out of your monthly subscription.
Yes, and the other thing is, their Netflix original series. They have going back
Mm.
to that IP conversation.
Stranger Things, big time.
Yeah, and they're doing it, the opposite. Instead of taking a beloved game franchise and putting it on the big screen, they've got these worlds that they have built themselves. Why not dive into that further, make it a little more immersive? And they played around with it. I just saw this the other day. There's some like a rom com version of this, but they had interactive games at one point that were basically shows, and you choose your own
Right. Yeah.
adventure. Yeah,
Yep.
they had one for Black Mirror and
Yep.
some others, but that was like them kind of playing with it, and then they're like, no, why don't we like actually make games? And so they completely own that flywheel, which is what is super cool. And I'm
Mm.
very interested to see, kind of where things go from there. And Rebel Moon, which is a Zack Snyder project, which originally was pitched as an
Star Wars.
installment in Star Wars. Yeah. He now is like, well, you know what? I have big aspirations. And he took it to Netflix, and they've got, a space opera of their own that they're looking to release. And they're launching a game at the same time that that
Mm.
movie comes out. So it's already an extension of that IP that allows people to get more out of those characters or that world or whatever, and really dive into it deeper. And I'm curious to see how that, starts to evolve and play out too. Is it a gimmick? Maybe. Is it cool? Definitely. It's a unique idea. Instead of one coming out and the other coming out months, years later, if they
Well, the old way was always cool. This movie got popular. How fast can we come out with a really crappy game?
yeah,
And, game making was just as slower in a lot of
it's
times.
true.
So it's like by the time all the stuff we know that a movie's getting made, there's not enough time to make a good. People always wonder, like, why wasn't there ever good Batman games? How from like there's when the movies were coming out, right,
Yeah,
or superhero games back in the day. Most of the time, it's just because of the for games they were like, okay, we got the green light, now make a Star Wars game. We got the green light on the movie, so now we can start production of a game, and that's not long enough. So it's really, but now again, we can speed up and still have a pretty good game by using game engines, which we didn't have us. We didn't have Unreal, didn't
yeah,
have sickness of what Unreal can do. Okay, cool. What about my personal favorite little trend is this space of like cozy games. And I don't know if anybody's heard of cozy games, but I think it speaks to a lot of pandemic because cozy games really probably, I mean, there's always been cozy games, which are games that, me growing up, games were always, it's a competitive, or it's about fighting, or it's about horror, or
mhm,
it's about like kind of getting you, getting like a movies, like action and stuff that's all about kind of being inside of that world. And I might not be an action star or a soldier or a space fighter, but I get to like step into that world for a little bit, or get just the scared bejesus from Resident Evil or whatever it is. And I honestly don't love that all the time. And so during the pandemic, I think nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted to feel scared, or because like the reality was that. So you had like Animal Crossing was like and the Animal Crossing is not new, but like that time, that's like the mainstream. What people could probably understand is like a perfect cozy game. Is that is it, where is like the worlds of these of like a cozy game? What does that mean to you? And like where do you see those kinds of genres going that aren't necessarily action traditional video games?
sure. Yeah. I mean, it just goes back to the fact that gaming is now so multifaceted. It's not just the stereotype anymore. And so with cozy games, just as much as you want that escapism into that action packed, space war that you don't get when you're at your desk for 8 hours a day. Some people, want a farming simulator or
Mm-hmm.
want something along those lines, something that's therapeutic, something that's calming. The soundtrack is more like, you know, ambiance or white noise or, something that will decompress you or, power wash simulator falls into that
Oh,
category of
I love those games, and I don't play them. I just love that they're there because I
it's
watch them on YouTube. But
oddly
it's the
satisfying type of
oddly
situation.
satisfying. Yeah, like the power washer's so perfect it hurts.
Oh yeah.
Lawn mowing,
Yep.
like like all of those things. There are big communities. Farm Simulator is a big competitive community. Driving trucks,
Yes.
like it's crazy out there. It's awesome. Like it's a weird. awesome world that those places are a little bit bigger than I think people might think
Yeah.
those communities are. Because the AAA giant things are great. I love it. I love a God of War, but like it's fun. I think people are being able to find their niche, And cozy games I thought was interesting because it seemed like nobody called it cozy games
Right.
until like TikTok, and so now you're seeing like the world of fast TikTok making something trend and then jumping on a trend and like building a community out of nothing, out of something that didn't exist like a year ago. And now a lot of independent games out inside, like living inside this cozy game world. It's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
You were just saying like, and I hadn't heard of it, Abzu.
Yes. Yeah.
I had
So
not heard of it, and its scores are nuts. And I was like, "Oh, it's like an underwater diving experience, but not like a real one. It's like still a cool game. It looks
yeah,
like but you're like, diving in these crazy worlds, but it's not,
yeah. It's like
it's not like Eco the Dolphin back in the day, which was just
no,
absolutely the most stressful game I've ever played to date, where you're
arguably
just
one of the most difficult games ever.
and the most stress inducing game just because you're just going to run out of breath and kill that poor dolphin at any point. But this is more like fantastic and awe and inspiring, and like
Yeah,
you're you're exploring crazy
it's
worlds.
Subnautica's really chill cousin, kind of, right? Where there's no um, intense challenges. There's not like you're not trying to avoid a megalodon. There's not,
Yeah,
it's not like that. It's you're exploring the beauty of ocean life. And it's like you can put as much time into it as you want to and discover this species or, this batch of coral or what have you. And, it's just something, again, that's a little bit more therapeutic, a little more relaxing. Um, and yeah, it's more of it's a little bit like the early days of the VR games, right?
mhm.
Where, they're with the Oculus or any of those others, you would go down and look around and just see all of it around you.
Space or
And
ocean,
yeah,
like pet a whale, like it
yeah,
was
it's
pretty
like,
crazy. Still pretty good.
oh, that type of thing. And I mean, it's not quite as immersive, but it's the same general vibe where it's um, calming. It's just calming and beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm doing this not to like get the blood pumping and to like, I'm doing it to like chill.
Yeah,
And there's a huge market there, right? Like we already said that not everybody's going to game the same way, and we can't just keep hitting the same button. Gaming games want to break out. And I think with that, Brandon, like I want to have you back on to talk. We've talked a lot about like what's going on inside the world of gaming, but I really think that the whole metaverse thing that happened, nothing happened to it. It's still it's still happening. It's still, we might not call it that. Maybe shouldn't have ever called it that. But it's like we get a little carried away with ourselves, but the idea is still there. It's like gaming wants to break out of gaming. We have like gaming wants to break loose and be more part of work life and part of our regular life, and like adding gamification into a walk down the street or going to the park or like getting my having my daughter do her chores.
hmm
And like I think it's so fascinating to have another conversation with you maybe about where we see gaming on coming out of the world of gaming and sneaking into different places, because that's where the market's going to grow. It's where it's going to go. It's like it's gonna have to break out of the game. Like I'm doing this for my pastime,
right,
because you have now an entire generation, mid 40s, that I'm like born on games. Everyone's been
exactly,
born on games, so it's like I would like life to help me a little bit more. Like I'm really good at collecting stuff on Baldur's Gate. Like help me do that with my finances. Help
yeah,
me do
absolutely,
that. Like I get excited about that, and I think I'd love to have you back on if you're
yeah,
willing to chat about the other side of stuff, and then getting into AR and VR and all that kind of crazy nuttiness. It's a whole other.
Yeah,
older
I,
conversation.
I'd love to. I'd love to come back on anytime.
Well, great. It's so fun to chat with you. Thank you so much for giving us like the inside knowledge on like where things are and giving everybody just more proof that it's like if you're interested, ask the right people questions. Don't go out and try to start doing it or don't make a 90s Super Mario movie. Like, you've got to start. It's not something you want to do in a week. You know, it's something it's something you want to learn about, go to some events, like understand, like have a guide with. And you'd be lucky enough to have your guide be Brandon Painter himself from Gamesquare Holdings. Thanks for joining us. Where can people find out? Where can people give you a call or find out more or follow your rad um, LinkedIn feed?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on there pretty consistently. Love having conversations with people who are new to the space, that are curious about the space. I'm on Twitter, although that or I guess X, and that feed can
X.
vary. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And to all you out there, thanks for joining us for another Pop Marketing Podcast. And see you next time.